Okay, so thanks everyone, and thanks for the introduction. Yeah, I head up the digital marketing strategy for Pfizer UK. Pfizer's a huge organisation, as I'm sure you're aware. I work in the patented side of the business, a global innovative pharma. So I oversee 12 patented products and also the vaccines portfolio, of which we have 6. We have a really diverse group here today. We've got Mark Curtis to my right, Sally Borner and Alberto Prado. I'll give you a little intro to their background. Mark is possibly the one with the most breadth and length in terms of his experience within digital. He's been working in the digital landscape for about 30 years. Started off in radio sales promotion. He's also worked with virtual reality, one of the pioneers there. He founded the company he currently works for with 2 other people. It's subsequently been acquired by Accenture. And you've even had some fray into mobile dating apps and all sorts. So it's pretty much, he's covered a big breadth of areas there. We've got Sally there next to Mark. Sally is Chief Superintendent of West Midlands Police and has worked in the police force for some 26 years. She's got experience in partnership working, crime reduction, serious crime investigation and covert policing, and recently led the development and delivery of the blueprints of future of policing in the West Midlands, which she'll be talking us through, and that includes a number of digital projects which she is helping to operationalise. And then last but not least, we've got Alberto Prado, who is Head of Digital Accelerator for Royal Philips. Alberto's also had a colourful career, started off as a management consultant, and then worked largely for Nokia but other telecoms firms also. He's responsible for designing the next generation of connected digital propositions in health tech. So within Philips, he deals with devices, if you like, for patients and so on, but also large-scale equipment for hospital trusts. So we're going to be covering a number of areas. We're going to be looking at the challenges of digital transformation, why firms need to do it, which we've heard about a lot today, and the benefits of that. But we'll also be taking a look at where we've come with digital, so how digital's evolved until now, and how do we feel digital's going to evolve in the future, and how can we really be resilient and make sure that we evolve as the technology evolves. So Mark, I'm going to start with you as you're kind of the mentor in the group, if you like. Having worked for a number of organisations, what would you say is if there was a key to the success of succeeding with digital transformation today?
So I think there's a couple of things. One is, and we're seeing it more and more now, is it has to be CEO-led. So it has to be guided right from the top. That shouldn't be managed from the top. In fact, a lot of the innovation should come from below. It's most unlikely you'll get a CEO who is able to drive the innovation, but the CEO has to set up the foundations for success for the innovation and really, really believe in it. And if you don't get that, you're going to struggle, because transformation is going to involve sweeping changes across the entire organisation, and there will always be pockets of resistance. So I think it's important you have a CEO who is committed to saying, it doesn't matter what it takes, we need to do this, and is pushing it through, and that mandate comes from the top. I think another aspect of that I saw recently, which was really interesting, is one CEO in France who we've just started work with, actually choosing on her first day. She's, I think, the first female CEO in the top 40 French companies. She'd just been appointed, and she chose to make digital transformation the cornerstone of what she announced on her first day at work. This is what I'm going to do. And she was doing it evidently, deliberately, in order to manage stock market expectations. We're going to invest in this area. This is what we need to do as a utility company. It's a large energy company. This is where we're going to go. And I thought that was very, very interesting ground setting. So I think the second main thing, which is, a statement of the bleeding obvious, and we've just heard it, we've heard it several times today, is you have to put the user, not the customer. You have to put the user at the middle of what you do. And I think the measure of an organisation is the degree to which they're prepared to go in order to do that and traduce across their traditional boundaries. And those users, I talk about user rather than customer. We recently worked with, or are working with Telstra, the big telco in Australia. They're market dominant, and one of the things we're doing for them is we're trying to transform the customer experience, and that includes call centres. So we actually went to the call centres, we saw what the staff did, which fully understood the nature of what they were up against, retail, and intriguingly, field engineers. So these are the cable guys. These are people who come and drill holes in your wall and leave muddy footprints in your house, and either do or don't turn up on time. All of those things which as a user you kind of feel as pain and anxiety, because you want the broadband, but you don't want the drilling in the hole in the wall, etc., etc. So we went out, and we actually went on the road with these guys for a week, and we observed what they did. So that's normal. Most competent design agencies would recommend that you do that. You do ethnographic research, you observe, you interview. Then I think we did something unusual, which was that we pulled them in-house and we taught them to be, two of them, we taught them to be designers for a couple of weeks.
Right.
And the first thing we did, which was just alarmingly simple, we said, draw your tools. So we got them to draw the tools, and drawing the tools turned out that they could draw. They didn't think they could, but they could. And then we said, now begin to assemble the tools you'd actually like to have. And we gave them plasticine and stickies and Lego and all of that sort of stuff, and actually some fun stuff like Google Glass to play with. And we began to get them to actually assemble what they would really like. And in the end, completely collaboratively, and people overuse the word collaboration, but in this case it was really true. What happened was these two field engineers, who until recently had literally been working on their knees all day long, were suddenly designing the tools that they could use. So all of the tools we designed are now in the market, around in the field, being used by the field force. I do not believe that would have happened if the organisation hadn't had the bravery to say, yep, let's take those two guys off the job, and we'll get them into the studio and we'll start designing stuff with them.
So that echoes some of what we've heard today, where they talk about transforming the internal in order to be able to transform the broader organisation and obviously deliver to the customer. Have you just out of interest, having worked in so many different areas, are there particular sectors that adapt to that change better than others, would you say?
Gosh, that's a good question. I think I'm probably better able to say the sectors which are struggling to adapt at the moment.
Right.
So I think consumer packaged goods and services are quite slow on the adoption curve on this. I think they're still wedded to they're moving clearly, but they've been so firmly wedded to the brand marketing model that they're struggling to understand how to shift across from that. But they're beginning to do that. We're beginning to hear a lot more action from them. Banks, curiously, given what you sometimes hear about their reputation, have been actually right at the forefront. It wasn't a surprise to see Miguel from Lloyd's talking earlier today, because I think the banks missed out on the internet first time round. They realised they'd fluffed it. Along came mobile, which gave them a second chance, and they began to adopt mobile really, really quickly. And some of the more advanced banks, BBVA spring to mind in Spain, Guarantee Bank in Turkey, really, seized the opportunity with mobile and said, we're not going to let this one pass us by. Now, they're still under attack from a lot of fintech startups, but they have actually been very open-minded about what to do. Yeah,
I wonder whether part of that is if anyone's in the financial sector, they would know better than me, but whether part of it is the regulations. I know certainly working in pharma that we have that issue, that we sometimes use regulations as a reason not to do something. And I'm going to use that to lead on to Sally, because Sally, your line of work, clearly very traditional. I can imagine digital was an interesting concept when you were working on your blueprint. Can you tell us how digital and technology has helped shape policing?
Certainly, Kate. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Before I move into digital, what I want to do is just take a moment, and it's probably slightly ironic, bearing in mind we're looking at future-proofing our organisations. I want to take a moment to reflect back on the heritage of policing. I have 26 years with West Midlands Police, and I think for all of us, we have never known a time as challenging, as complex, but also as opportune and as exciting as now. And the ambition that exists across policing nationally in the UK, and my experience within the West Midlands, is around a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to transform policing for generations to come. But in looking even further back than the 26 years that demonstrate the grey hair that I proudly sport, is Sir Robert Peel. And it was really poignant this morning, because I was going to talk about Sir Robert Peel at the start, but as I walked out of Liverpool Street Station and took a moment to look up into the sunshine and the wonderfulness of London, on the wall, straight in front of me, is a picture of Sir Robert Peel. Sir Robert Peel, the founding father of British policing, whose values exist even stronger now than they did in 1829, is the foundation upon which we are taking traditional values and transforming what we do. He created 9 fundamental principles of policing, and there's 2 that I want to share with you today, which really provide the foundation for where we're moving, not just in the digital space, but more widely around policing transformation. The first one is the fundamental relationship, policing by consent, that we hold incredibly dear and is unique in terms of UK policing. The police are the public, and the public are the police. The second core principle that I want to emphasise in terms of those fundamental foundations are the importance of prevention. And Alberto is going to talk later on around the emphasis of prevention within healthcare, because prevention changes people's lives, it reduces demand, and it enables us all to operate ever more effectively in a very challenging financial world. So a little bit around, I guess, policing nationally and our focus on digital. I think it's very significant if we look at National Police Chiefs Council, who are all the chief constables that oversee policing within the UK. One of the 4 fundamental foundations for policing to the future is digital. And we would identify 4 key themes in terms of that digital transformation. The first key theme are new opportunities to enhance our relationships with citizens in our societies, the police of the public of the police, through digital. But it's about digital enhancing the human relationship. That will always be core to what policing contributes. We are an organisation of people who every single day are changing people's lives, often in the most difficult and traumatic of situations. So ensuring we blend human needs with the opportunities that digital provides to enhance that relationship and help them is key. The second key opportunity in the digital sphere is very much around how we equip our colleagues with the technology that helps them do their jobs more effectively. And I'll talk a little bit around some of that work in the West Midlands shortly. So equipping them with mobile technology and also enabling them to access data and information in a timely way that helps them make decisions at the earliest possible opportunities which support citizens who need our help. And the third key theme in terms of that digital transformation is around changing patterns of demand. We are seeing ever more criminality and crime being committed on the internet, online, but also the more traditional stuff that we deal with. There is, in 99% of occasions, some form of digital footprint. So let's use car theft as an example. The majority of cars now have computers within them. From that, we can gain all sorts of information and intelligence to enable us to effectively investigate. So the shift in demand into the online space requires us to really look at our digital intelligence and investigative capabilities. So taking it from the national, I guess, to the West Midlands piece, if I may. Real quick summary of who we are. We are the 3rd largest police force in the UK after the Met and Police Scotland. We're an organisation of over 11,000 people. We're one of only 5 police forces in the country, consistently assessed as outstanding or good in all of the key areas. We're the only urban police force in the country with that level of performance. But what I wanted to do today is really share the ambition. The world is changing so fast, and digital is such a key part of that. We are never complacent. We will not stand still. We recognise there are so many opportunities to develop further. And it's also, I think, of note to reflect in terms of our ambition. Over the last 5 years, we have reduced our operating costs by £173 million. But our transformation work is not about cost cutting, it's about transforming the service we provide, and a consequence of that is being able to operate ever more efficiently. We've got a strong digital footprint. We've been at the forefront of a lot of social media development. We have over 20 million views of our Flickr pictures. We have 750,000 people on a daily basis who follow our 300 plus Twitter accounts. 1.2 million access to our website. We're the most followed UK police force on Instagram. So we've got a strong social media footprint. But we recognise, in terms of the challenges, we can no longer do that on our own, which is why nearly 2 years ago we entered into a groundbreaking partnership with Accenture to actually draw on the insight, the challenge, the reach, the methodologies that another organisation can bring us to realise our ambition for the people of the West Midlands. And I just want to pull out, I guess, 2 key projects that I now have lead responsibility for, work that we've been developing in recent months with the support of colleagues working in Accenture Interactive and Digital through Fueled, to develop new ways for the public to connect up with us, to report things online, to interact, to upload evidence online, to stay updated in terms of the progress, to also understand how we can help them, because we receive over 2 million calls for service each year, which is 5,500 calls a day. Over 30% of those are people who want help and advice. Well, actually, by enabling some of that information to be accessed online, it both improves the service that that member of the public gets, it frees up time and focus to protect the most vulnerable people. And our ambition, which we are still at the very early stages of, but reassuringly listening to much of the inputs this morning, where we're moving to is very coherent with many people who've been there well ahead of where we're at. Our emphasis is on a very sophisticated approach to digital, recognising differing needs, maintaining human contact in high threat, risk, harm, vulnerability, where people's lives are at risk or something awful is happening, where you can absolutely expect to pick up the phone, ring 999, hear a human voice on the end, and then a short while afterwards hear the reassuring sirens, the blue lights turn up and help you. But there's a significant volume of stuff that we do that is not about emergencies. And actually, by creating new capabilities online, we improve, we reduce demand, and enable our finite amount of resources to deal with greatest threat, risk and harm. Because an interesting fact, very briefly, of the 2 million calls for service we get each year, 14% of those relate to crime. A significant proportion of the contact people have with us is for a wide range of other things they need help with, which is where our contribution to the wider well-being of society comes in, and our focus on prevention and partnership.
Very interesting. So a multitude of reasons, why you're employing digital.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's great. So Alberto, obviously you're going to be talking more about the health technology side. I wonder if it would help the audience just to explain a little bit about the position of Philips within that space, just in case they aren't aware. It's obviously something you had to explain to me.
Yes. Yeah. So Philips is a 125-year-old company, which is pretty old. And we just probably went through a big pivot, so probably the single biggest pivot in our history, which is we spinning off the lighting division, and we're focusing 100% on health tech. And health tech being the combination of our B2B business and our B2C business. And it's quite exciting, and I think one of the reasons is that we see great opportunities in healthcare. Healthcare is an industry that is at the verge of being disrupted. And there are many reasons for that. I think one of the key drivers of that is the fact that we as a population, the average age of the population is increasing faster than ever before. So basically we don't die anymore, which is a good thing. There's progress in medicine, but we we don't die anymore, maybe at some point. We get to live longer, right? Which is a good thing, but we get to live longer with a certain condition that needs to be monitored effectively. That linked to the fact that the number of people with lifestyle-induced conditions is highest than ever before poses a significant challenge in healthcare systems. In fact, I do say that we don't have a healthcare system, we have a sick care system, right? So we basically interact with the system whenever we get sick, which is probably not the most effective way of doing it. And if you think about it, healthcare systems, were designed around big buildings. We talked about the glass buildings earlier on. Big buildings with electricity where you get to go when you're sick, and they have machines, and the knowledge is in people's heads, and it's not necessarily always very transparent, and you get treated with a generic therapy because it should be safe for all of them, all of the patients, and therefore you get just the generic treatment. And it needs to transform into a more preventative system, certainly, first of all, but also a system that is actually able to be a care system that is able to be delivered at the palm of your hand with continuous engagement, delivered where you are, where you work, where you play, where you live, that is customized to you and that is affordable as well. So it's a massive change that needs to go through. And I think, we believe that digital technologies can help, or will help. We're talking about not necessarily only about the penetration of smartphones and big data capabilities, cloud and so on, but also what's coming next. If you think about the next 5 years, all the innovation that could be enabled by artificial intelligence, by augmented reality, by conversational UIs, by blockchain potentially applied to healthcare, there is a lot coming our way, and I think it's very exciting. We are building also our own platform, if you like, in partnership with companies such as Amazon Web Services, Salesforce, because we believe that part of the solution will be to look at healthcare from a continuum perspective, and it starts when people are healthy and trying to prolong that state for as long as you can. And it moves then into preventative care, diagnosis, treatment, and home care. And we, as individuals, walk through that continuum several times in our life. And the ability for us to be able to collect data from Philips and non-Philips devices, compile it, normalize it, and run algorithms that could extract value from the data and be able to, enable the right care professionals to intervene at the right point in time, at the right stage in that continuum is going to be where the solution is going to be. And if we want to tackle the big, hairy, healthcare challenges such as, cancer, diabetes, cardiovascular diseases and respiratory diseases that kill 38 million, according to the World Healthcare Organization every year, we need to look at it from a continuum perspective and be able to diagnose as early as possible, first time right, come up with customized and tailored therapies that are based on your genetic makeup, and be able to monitor you from the point when you leave the hospital and now recovering at home. Because believe me, hospitals are not great places to be. You don't want to, you want to go home as early as you can, but you want to be, continue to be monitored, and you want to continue to have the reassurance that you can live a life that is independent, that is highly autonomous, but knowing that somebody's going to be taking care of you before actually any potential event happens. That will not only increase your quality of life, but also will improve and reduce cost for healthcare systems.
So Alberto, bearing in mind your firm is century-old plus, and you mentioned a couple of partnerships that you've got there. Do you, where do you get your agility from? Do you work with startups? Did you want to talk a little bit about that? Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, we work with startups a lot. In fact, we didn't start a long time ago. I think this has been a process of understanding, particularly for a 125-year-old organization that has a huge innovation capabilities and a huge research organization, going outside to find part of the solutions to the problems that you're looking at is not necessarily something that comes very intuitively. So I think over the last 15, 20 years, we've opened up quite a lot gradually, doing more open innovation, engaging with suppliers on innovation, not just only commodity supply. And more recently, indeed, partnering up with startups, which is a bit of a clash of cultures. And I think there, the digital accelerator that I lead actually plays a very central role, because we are the part of Philips that come closest to a startup. So we speak the same language, we apply the same methodologies, and we try to identify which are the startups that actually would make sense for Philips to engage. And we try to bring the relevant businesses, and we are a catalyst of that innovation process. We believe that if you try to solve healthcare, which is a big problem that is worthwhile putting a lot of effort into, it is inevitable that you're going to have to partner up with a large number of companies, whether they're big or small. And the smaller ones are probably going to be the ones that are more ambitious about things. They don't have any legacy, they can think freely about solving a problem, they can think out of the box. And we believe that that's where a lot of the biggest innovation is going to come from. Now, being a startup in healthcare is challenging. You have to be a bit crazy, or you have to be very passionate about trying to solve healthcare problems, which is very inspirational for a lot of people. I mean, we find healthcare startups that are there just because they want to do good, and I think that's very inspirational. The challenge of these companies is that to go from Series A to Series B, they have just probably about $3 to $4 million on average, and they have to spend that. They have to live on that for 1.5 to 2 years, and they have to be, achieve clinical validation. They have to achieve their first, streams of revenues. And believe me, hospitals are not necessarily the best customers that you could find. And they can benefit a lot from partnering up with companies like Philips, which can help scale, which can help with access to domain expertise or with regulatory expertise. And we find that the percentage of corporate venturing going into these startups is actually outpacing just venture capitalists, because it's not just about the money, it's about the ability to help them scale. And we don't see them necessarily as a threat, but rather as opportunities for collaboration.
Okay, great. So, Mark, I'm going to bring it back to you if that's okay. Having had a career in a number of startups, then being bought by a huge firm, do you find that you actually help Accenture, if you like, keep current because you have that agility, that mindset? And how do you stop yourself, I suppose, in being, there must be a certain degree of integration with a larger firm. How do you actually stop yourself then becoming, or losing that agility and becoming more corporate?
It's an interesting question. I think we've found it, so it's been 3 years now, and it's been amazingly successful. So just to give you some metrics, so you see the scale. We were 220 people in about 9 studios globally when we were acquired. We're now in 21 studios and we're almost 800 designers. So it's the scale of change has been very, very rapid. I think overall what we found is, and this is a theme I could talk more about, but the kind of the market-facing stuff has been fantastic. Of course, there have been cultural difficulties here and there, working styles in particular. We've had to work quite hard on those. I think there were some interesting moments in the early days when we discovered that the very rational, risk-averse mindset which a technology consulting company has to have didn't always cope very easily with what we call the black hole, which is where designers go into a sort of quiet period where they're thinking about stuff and they're creating it, but actually there isn't anything tangible to come out. We've had to work quite hard on bridging that gap and helping both sides understand that actually there will be moments in the creative process when things go a bit dark and then stuff comes out at the other end. In fact, one of the most inspiring things I heard was from our studio lead and design director in Madrid, who said, actually, designers feel it too. Which is that you know what you've got to do. You know you've got to do something, but you're standing, it's a creative thing, you're standing at the edge of the chasm and you don't know what it's going to be. So you're feeling fear at the same time. And of course it turns out our colleagues and in Accenture are feeling the same thing before we actually get some deliverables which we can deliver to clients. So we had to work quite hard on that, and I think that's been, well, the numbers prove it's been very successful. I think the other side has been, working with, but then this is standard, that you have to shift the culture around all the back office stuff that you do as well. And I think this is one of the areas where the comparison between startups and large companies doesn't always trade off very well, because startups just don't have a back office. In fact, in some cases they don't even have an office. So it's not always easy to make that comparison, because startups have got some disadvantages. They don't have very many assets. They're trading off fear. They often don't have a lot of money, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, fear can be a great thing to trade off. But what they don't have is that back office stuff. And I'm beginning to detect that one of the things that's going to get in the way of transformation of large organizations is not the people at the front end, the sort of people who are on this stage, or the sort of people who are probably in the, here, who are thinking about the customer, thinking about colleagues, thinking about how do we transform our processes and our products to be better for these people. But it's the back office people. And there's a story I've told, there's somewhere in the world, I was visiting a studio the other day and working with a client, and we have staff working in the client premises 4 out of 5 days a week. And I went to visit, and it didn't look like a design space. And they'd been there for some time. And I said to our lead, what's going on here? Why doesn't this yet look like a creative space? And she said memorably, the facilities people won't let us put anything on the walls. I thought it was really interesting, and I began to sort of think at that stage, maybe it's the back office people, HR, law, facilities, finance. We have to transform them digitally too. It's not just about the user-facing stuff.
Yeah, and I get that. I definitely feel that at Pfizer sometimes as well. don't tell anyone that, but yeah. So I want to I want to switch it slightly. We have just a couple of minutes before we break for questions, but I'm just conscious for the part of the day that I've been here today, we all have spoken really positively about digital, and that's probably because we're all fully bought into it and do it our day job. But I have a question for you, Sally, because you come from a traditional area. I certainly within Pfizer come from a traditional area. We're actually digital. I spend a lot of my time, I spend 80% of my time thinking about how to say something and 20% of my time actually saying it. And the reason is we work in a very traditional space where the sales reps go out to GPs and hospital trusts to talk about our medicines. And when I talk about digital to them, they feel very afraid because they feel that actually digital is a replacement, it's not a complementer. And I was just wondering in your discussions on the floor, when you start talking about digital, and has it reduced the number of people you're bringing on, and are people seeing that and thinking, hang on a minute, I better not get engaged because it could result in my job loss kind of thing?
The culture piece is huge, and that's the theme I think that's come out from everybody who's spoken so far today. I think it's about, and many people have spoken about the philosophy of test and learn, try some things, test them, be prepared to fail. Involve people as well is absolutely key, and that's one of the fundamental principles that we have taken from start right the way through to how we're doing our Westminster Police 2020 stuff. So in the blueprint design, we involved thousands of members of the public, partners, thousands of colleagues, such that when we launched that last spring, it almost felt like a bit of a damp squib because people were like, oh yeah, I get that, yeah. And people had a role to play in it, so creating legitimacy by involving people, exciting people, being realistic in terms of expectations, and actually leadership is key, but the most influential people in our organisations are colleagues, certainly from a policing point of view, who are interacting with the public. I just want to use one really brief example. It was the second thing I was going to mention that I forgot about, so thanks, Kate, for giving me the opportunity. Another project that I'm leading is our mobility project, which is where we are equipping initially response and neighbourhood officers, 300 of them within 2 of our Birmingham local policing units, with smart technology and initially one app to enable them to update and deal with incidents out there on the streets. They don't have to keep coming back to police stations. We've just concluded that pilot, and I want to share a couple of examples with you around how by doing some stuff and showing digital opportunities in action, it really does create momentum. So over 90% of colleagues using those devices have said it has fundamentally changed the way in which they work and the service they can provide to the public. There's a very powerful anecdotal story from a colleague who 3 months into the pilot stood up in front of us, all of the senior leaders in West Midlands Police. And he was selected for the pilot by his own admission because he's not a digital native, he's not a digital adopter, he was somebody who wouldn't go anywhere near a computer. And he stood there, he held out his smart device and he said, I've been in policing for 24 years. You've given me loads of gadgets and gizmos to try and help me do my job. I will tell you now, if you took this device off me, I would resign. Now, thankfully, he hasn't resigned, but people like John, the neighbourhood officer, are the people who ultimately create the excitement, create the momentum, influence peers, and one of the challenges is around trying to hold people back such that as we start now to move into ever more speedy rollout, that we keep the sort of discipline whilst at the same time creating excitement.
It's very interesting. I just literally this morning read an article in Harbour Business Review about a new book. I can't remember the title of the book now, but it must be, I think it's this month's HBR, which was about startups and about founders and the important role they play. And one of the things it said, one of the 3 outstanding, is founders obsess about frontline staff. So it was very interesting and really, really, validates what you're doing and how you're going about it. It's that obsession. And what it then went on to say is that often in large organisations that small company founder obsession disappears, and then things begin to go wrong and you're setting yourself up for failure. I thought it was interesting.
Yeah.
Great. So we have 7 minutes. So I'm going to throw questions to the floor. If anybody has anything. No, I have a question actually, which is we talk, this section here is about how we stay current, and we talk a lot about putting customer at the fore and user testing and so on. One question I have is, can we afford to always stay current? And how do we, as digital leaders, how do we get that buy-in from the top, where sometimes it's not always easy to demonstrate return on investment. Has anyone come up against any challenges? If you've just rolled out something last year, but actually that's better now this year, have you come up against issues
I think
there?
how to stay current. I think I get asked that question in different ways. Also, you know, are you where are you in the digital transformation? Are you there? And I always say, you know, a transformation is not a destination; it's a journey. I think as a company, we need to just some kind of embedded in our DNA that we need to remain with a certain level of paranoia and become a learning organization and be adaptive to change. I think if you look at how we used to innovate in the last century, I mean, Philips was a very strong hardware-centric organization. So in hardware, it's all about extracting efficiencies and trying to do what you do cheaper, faster, and better. And you get penalized if you fail because you're not supposed to fail because all the, you know, the whole environment, all the environment is known. We need to become. We go from there. You know, we need to transition from there to becoming a learning and exploration organization. I actually come to terms with the fact that sometimes as part of that, we need to fail, and if we fail, we need to learn from that and get up again and start exploring other areas. And I think this is not just a fashion of these, you know, of the beginning of the 21st century. It's just how companies are going to become going forward. There's no way back, you know. And I think the companies that, and I come from Nokia, by the way, the companies that did not learn how to become a learning organization will actually fail.
Great.
I think there's
We have a question over there, actually, Mark, if that's okay.
Thank you, it's me again. I want to ask you, when you are trying to transform a company who is not digitally driven from the beginning, how do you do that? Do you bring external talent, or you try to develop your talent to understand digital? What is the best way to do it?
Shall I answer that one, I suppose, as the organisation that's probably been around the longest, since 1829 in West Midlands Police for well over 40 years. It comes back to the first point I made. It's about linking it to the values of your organisation, because the values are what drive people to come in to do what they do every single day, and seeing digital as an enabler to help people deliver, whether they work within the private sector, whether they work within the public sector, whether they're a police officer, a member of police staff. So stripping all of that complexity, all of that fast-moving, mind-blowing stuff that, you know, we're all facing every day, and stripping it right back to the fundamental values that define the organisations that we're all proud to be a part of. And that's certainly from our perspective in a nutshell.
I mean, but what I would do, and someone inferred it in an earlier session, which is I would literally present the values very differently to different stakeholders as I'm talking to them. So much like Mark was saying, he really tries to work to understand what their role actually is. I definitely think it helps if you've had a colourful career, actually, because you can sort of put, you know, fingers out in different pies. But it's actually what I might say to someone in my team would be very different to what I would say to a sales rep. It's all credible, but you choose what you say, and you don't give them the whole story because they've switched off after, you know, the bit that's relevant to them. So really, again, like we've said before, applying what you would do to your customer as you would to your staff, I think is very important. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, I'd say, so as a practical tip, make things visible. So digital is inherently a difficult medium to see for a number of reasons, obvious reasons. So I think making things visible is crucial, and that can be at the level of a prototype, done quickly, which can then be passed around your peers and the C team and whoever it is who needs to see it, so they can begin to understand what it is you're talking about. And you know, wireframes are useless from that point of view. You know, people take them literally, and we long ago gave up showing wireframes to people who hadn't done digital transformation journeys before, because they took them very literally, and of course they're really dull to look at. They serve a great purpose. Much better to create a customer journey and put it on the walls. And put it on the walls as close as you possibly can to where the CEO exists. I'm completely serious. I've seen this happen, and I've seen, you know, customer journeys the size of this here, and it's been profoundly effective in the organisation because it creates an artifact that people can collaborate around, talk about. And there's a secondary reason for doing it, which is actually complex customer journeys cannot be looked at comfortably on a PDF. They just can't. You know, you end up scrolling sideways and ups and down, and, you know, it's a useful way of transmitting it to somebody, but actually it's a god-awful way of looking at something and getting the big picture. So show the big picture and put plenty of detail on it so people can see this is very solid and it's grounded in something.
Can I just add as well, I think bringing it to life so it means something, so it connects with people from an emotional point of view in terms of your organisations. And I think the other thing, and it kind of links to the keeping it current, it's actually about weaving it in to how this is going to help people on a daily basis do the work that they do. So this isn't just about, for us, a kind of pipe dream in 2020. Actually, there's a lot of stuff that's happening now that is helping colleagues in their wide-ranging policing responsibilities. If they see that it helps them in their daily work, actually then it really does start to embed, because I think for everybody in this room, none of us can shut up shop and suddenly stop doing what we do. We have to deliver the transformation alongside the core daily business that ultimately will impact on citizens, will impact on customers. So weaving it into daily business and making it real and connecting with people's emotional values is key.
Okay, so I have 1 minute, so I'm just going to sum up, if that's okay. I don't think we have any outstanding questions. So obviously very different sectors that we've got up on the stage today. I think what's clear is there are two drivers for digital transformation: need to future-proof, one of them being a need, whether that need be an environmental need, probably the space that particularly that Alberto and I work in terms of an ageing demographic, and relevant again, of course, to the other areas, but also a competitive need and cost need to reduce costs, make us more productive. But importantly, there's a real want to evolve, and I think we've seen that really clearly here with Sally and her vision, is that there's a real want to actually serve customers better, to optimise through the use of digital. And then I think probably the second thing that's come through, certainly dominant in this conversation, is this need again to really focus on the back office, the internal structure, and that's not just your digital functions, it's cross-functional in order to enable us to deliver externally. Is there anything else that you felt I missed? Was that okay? Good. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.